We pushed the button.
We pushed the button.
Jenny
It's
has
ready.
pushed the button. She is amazing.
Mike, this was for you.
We've done it, Mike. Welcome. The Indie Council is in session. This is the place for leading voices from across the industry to gather to talk news, titles, and everything indie. I'm your master of ceremonies, Jill Grote, the Indie Informer, joining the council today. As vibrant as Kepler Interactive's latest release Ultras, it's Jenny Wyndham. Hey, Jenny. How you doing?
Hello. Cheers. Yay, launch week.
Everybody's just going to take a nap after this, I think.
Oh, yes.
And also joining the council, content creator, runner, and beer drinker, it's Janet Garcia.
Wow.
Hello. Enjoying these deep
Hello.
cuts from our
Yeah.
Discord direct message that we
Like,
all have.
that's why we make a podcast, so that we can tell everybody that we have jokes they don't understand.
Yeah.
Really.
You gotta become the content to really get the full lore.
Mhm.
It'll just start popping up in the background. And we'll have a... No. I took that joke too far in my head. I'm sorry, Jen. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah? Feeling like no one else is snowing, right?
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. No,
Yeah,
I am. It is almost ready to snow here, so I'm excited for that.
I'm so much more energized than I was when you asked me how I was doing before we started recording.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you get emergency. We forgot the production person was not joining the podcast today. We love you, Mike. We wish you were here. We're going to make fun of you throughout. Enjoy. Jumping over to indie news. We have just finished Steam Next Fest. We thought the week's over. We're all going to be good this week. And then avalanche of things hit us. But we do want to talk about what happened over Steam Next Fest. Steam put out their 50 top most played games of the February event. Of those, I'm like going through, like, I don't know about y'all. I'm looking at this list and I'm like, I didn't hear anybody talking about these. I didn't hear like I don't know why these are on here, because I have about 8 of these, give or take. I didn't count as closely as probably I should have. It seems like, Jenny, you've got 13 on this list.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go over the whole list, but I do just want to go through and maybe shout out like the top 10. So we have, why am I getting? Oh, poor Mike. Getting messages from Mike, who we tried to have us help, and he has to be in bed. We need him to be in bed right now. So top 10 of the most played demos of February 2024 Steam Next Fest include Dungeonborn, which I did play, Stormgate, Pacific Drive, very well earned there, Homeworld 3, Backpack Battles, Dread Dawn, Millennia, Balatro? I know this is Mike's thing, and I'm gonna talk about it later, and it's really fun, but I can't say it. Rotwood, I think, is the top 10. So, how did you guys feel about this list when you were looking at it?
I mean, it
feels
feels
like
interesting
really-
because you go.
Everybody talk all at the same time. It's a new podcasting technique that we're doing.
We thought for the exact same amount of time, which is just it's kind of scary. I'll keep mine short. I was just gonna say I think it speaks to like really specific sort of styles and niches, but I think that could be argued for just what Next Fest is in general, where I think more so than ever we're seeing more like hyper specific cuts. Like obviously a lot of things are integrating known genres and styles, like, you know, Balatro, however it's actually pronounced, roguelike deck builder. It's like, okay, that's not like brand new necessarily, but it's having its own specific twist. So yeah, hyper specific vibes from this.
Yeah,
Jen?
that's basically what I was going to say. I think it's really like you can see sort of the inclination of the Steam player base, I think, more so than anything else, like having like PvE, mechs, like strategy space,
Yes.
RTS, like all of those kind of titles tend to be more heavily emphasized in the like especially the PC space. And so I think seeing that emphasis in the top 10 here isn't too surprising. It's just really interesting because I I think kind of like you, I was like, I did not play very many of these top 10 titles at all. And so it's just interesting as a person to see how my interests maybe divide or like kind of like path away from where maybe this average PC player may find their interest.
Yeah. Do
But
any
yeah,
of us
pretty
count
cool.
ourselves as like PC players first? Because
Mm,
I'm not. I really started in the console area, and
Yeah.
like PC is just so much easier for indies and like
Yeah.
so full of indies. But I'm always like, anybody who watched my streams for Steam Next Fest knows my preference for like, I have to be playing a controller for this. Like I did play Dungeonborn and it's really fun. If y'all haven't played it, you should, because it's like um eh, you it's it is a sort of like Souls like situation.
okay.
But you are in there with other people and like it is a area gets smaller, like one person wins at the end.
Mm.
Well, not one
Mhm.
person wins at the end. You're trying to find a portal somewhere in the map to get out. And if you get out, you get to keep all your stuff, but if you don't, you die and your characters got like a stick to play with, you know? Like it's a really really cool concept. It's a very D&D. I really like it. And it is a blend of genres. And like you said, it is a genre that most people are familiar with a twist that most people are not. Um so yeah, the fact that it didn't have controller support as far as I could find was not good for my playing. Like this is one of those games I got onto stream and I'm like, I'm gonna have to not play this on stream right now because I'm gonna take my time with this and y'all are gonna see me die to this one skeleton over and over again. And that's not gonna be fun. Um but yeah, I think that's interesting that all of us have that sort of feeling of like this top 50 isn't really for us, but it does speak to how Steam is obviously a PC platform. And I wonder how many, like, I would love to see the breakdown of indie lovers and like how many in the indie space are kind of PC first or wait for, or if it's just like, because Steam Next Fest to me is just like a big, it's not technically an indie specific thing. It's just because there are so many indies that the indie space
Mhm.
really tends to look at it. Um, I am interested too in maybe Jenny could speak to this a little bit more. Like, what is the like effectiveness of PR in this list? Like, if you're getting your game out there, like,
Mm.
how are these? Like, I feel like for me, I haven't heard of these games. I look at
Yeah.
all the lists for like, what are the games you need to play? What are the demos that are going on? And I'm looking around, I'm seeing like people chatting and people talking. So I feel like I should have my finger on the pulse. And to see so many games that I haven't played listed here is very strange for me. So Jenny, what do you think?
I definitely think PR has a huge hand in it. I know just from the like publisher standpoint, when we know Next Fest is coming up, a lot of that placement, especially on the first day, happens with based on sort of wish list, how many like Steam page visits you have. There's a lot of numbers that go into like, hey, where do these games start kind of in the rankings? And so a lot of times and more companies will start reaching out earlier, getting demos to creators and press a little earlier so you can start getting content out right before the next fest happens so that you can get visibility like from the jump. Like when people start the next fest and they see a game, they can immediately go to YouTube and be like, should I actually try this out? So that PR element before Steam Next Fest is becoming more and more important. What's really interesting to me, especially because I also feel like I think all of us, we generally feel pretty on top of games and when they come out. And so some of these titles are just showing me just how specific PR may be getting, where I'm not the audience. So maybe I'm sure, certainly Dungeonborn and Stormgate, which are like number one and two. I didn't really know anything about them. I'm sure they got to the audiences they needed to. So it's
Mhm.
maybe showing me that the PR is getting much more specific, which is great. But it just shows me how many different niches and how many different types of games and communities and players are out there. Because, like, I mean, well, Pacific Drive, I work on it. So if I didn't know about it, that'd be concerning. But like, I did see some, like, I got an email for like backpack battles ahead of time. Like Light Your Frontier, which is probably
Mhm.
like one of the more sort of cozy adjacent type games up here in like the top 20. I got like PR for Light Your Frontier. So I think things are just getting much more specific, which is also really fascinating to me because it used to be very blanket, I feel like.
Yeah. That's a really interesting. Do you have a theory as to why that's happening? Is that more like being targeted? Is that reaching audiences better than just like here's your blank? Because like I think maybe what most people don't know is like ahead of the Steam Next Fest, we do get a lot of like here's this is coming embargo sort of thing so that we can have an idea of what we might want to play during the Steam Next Fest. So we do kind of have an idea in mind ahead of time. Um, and just knowing that inner working is really interesting. But uh, yeah, Jenny, what are your thoughts? Is there something that's changing this, or is obviously it's got
I
to
don't
be
know.
right?
I mean, I feel like the market is so saturated that it's honestly the smarter thing to do. If you're sending out mass, because you're working smarter and not harder, because you could send thousands of emails to everybody, but then get only like 3% clicking through and actually checking out the game because it doesn't actually matter to most people. So I think if this is indicative of a trend of people getting more specific with their outreach, that's a good thing. It's always better to find the communities who are actually into what you're making versus just trying to get everyone. I think from a press, I think your position and maybe Janet's position too, because you're both much more on the media side, I'd be interested in like, is that maybe not great because you want to stay in the loop on everything? Whereas for me, especially because I'm more on the dev side, so I see some of this as a consumer, I'm like, great. I don't necessarily want to hear about Homeworld 3. I don't like strategy games and I don't like space. So please don't like email me about this. But Light Your Frontier, I was ecstatic when I saw that email come through. So I think for me, it's great. I'm curious from like the media side how that feels, or if you feel like you've even felt that difference in outreach.
I'm gonna let Janet take this if she feels the inclination.
Um, I can talk about like I was gonna let you take it just because I
Okay,
feel like
okay.
you
I'll
have, you know.
yeah, I am interested in this particular topic. I I'm sort of with you, Jenny. I don't want everybody like emailing me about like Stormgate. Like I'm not sure that's going to be my jam. Like if you're sending me over a shooter, that's likely I'm not going to get covered, and it's wasting both of our times. Uh, and I do have a lot of instances where I get emails that are for things that are like outside of my scope. So like a AAA game, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to check out this AAA game?" I'm like, "Sorry, that's beyond the scope of my mission." Um, and they're like, "Yeah, of course it is." Everyone's always really nice. Like, it's that is the nice thing about all of this. Um, so on that side of things, yeah, like email inbox for Steam Next Fest is wild. Trying to get through everything is almost a full-time job. Um, in itself, if you want to cover any of the games, like you kind of have to not read all of your emails. Like that's the unfortunate thing, and I feel so bad, especially like covering indies. Like they are really looking for people who are going to be help getting the word out. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I really can't. I've definitely gotten to a lot of people this week saying like, "Hey, I'm really sorry I didn't get back to you last week. I can now like now that Steam Fest is over, I have time to actually cover some things." Um, but on the other hand, yeah, I do want to kind of keep on the pulse of what's happening. Um, so I guess it's good that Steam is putting out this kind of list. but at the same time, I don't know what's driving this list either. So I don't know if it's like that's sort of why I'm asking you about the PR stuff because I want to know like are these lists influenced by things that maybe aren't things I need to keep track of? Like is there just a huge media push for some games on here I haven't heard of and therefore like my audience isn't going to be that interested? Or do I just want like I have a website that I want to cover all indies and all kinds of indie players? And do I want to keep my blind spots open for for those kinds of players as well? That's like super important to me. I
Mm.
do enjoy a certain kind of game, but also I think too there is a kind of pigeonhole if you're the kind of person who likes a cozy game. Like I didn't get
Mhm.
messages for Dungeonborn, but, like, I'm super into it. Like, I think a lot of people have trouble with my dichotomy of, like, I love cute, cozy little games, but also I love murdering people, you know? So, um, it's kind of an interesting double thing there. Janet,
Yeah.
anything you wanna throw into that conversation? Oh, Jenny, go ahead.
A quick one, really quick addition. The list in particular that Steam puts out, I believe, is um, ordered in the most to least order of number of players, unique players who tried the demo. So I think that's interesting, maybe from a press standpoint, because it is showing like not any sort of PR push, like nothing about the PR push directly impacts it,
Mhm.
other than perhaps like the awareness of people who want to hop in, but it indicates more the actual number of people who like uniquely went in to try the demo.
Oh, that's a thing in and of itself, Jenny. We're going down a rabbit hole
I
so
know,
large.
this is it's super I love this kind of, like, data,
Yeah.
it's just fascinating to
Crunchy.
me.
'Cause it's just like, how is this list different if they choose just one kind of different variable, you know? Like, I wonder if we could get them to do different lists of, like, what was played in most in genre, like, what are the most
Yeah, that would be cool. Just
yeah.
to get more of a sense of maybe what like the hottest thing per category is. Because yeah,
Mm,
like I guess back to the question that you would pose, Jill, um, of what do you want as like press. I mean, at the end of the day, too, it's tough. Like I hear you and I see your pursuit of that like all indie games, right? But like that's never gonna be like that's never really gonna fully be possible. So then it becomes okay, like you're kind of constantly running triage on your own content of like, well, what am I
Mhm.
going to get to first that I definitely want to cover, and then kind of working your way backwards from there. I think for me, I can appreciate when PR clearly has a sense of what I've been covering or what I'm interested in, whether it's like they consume my content or just like stop by, my own website, which is currently just still mostly a solo project. Want to get that funded a little bit at some point, but mostly just kind of like my own stuff, some reviews, whatever. Um, yeah, but like I don't mind if you like hit me with something that I'm not interested in because maybe I would have been, or maybe you're just trying to like cast a wide net, or maybe I signed up for, your list as like the PR house or like the publisher or something. I do think as far as having the best of both worlds, that's where like marketing pushes I see from spaces like Devolver to an extent, even like Pop Agenda, where they kind of send out these preliminary. Here's the stuff we're working on. Like, what of this do you want to hear about? And it's kind of like
mhm,
you got the wideness of like it's a newsletter style email, but you can
Mhm.
kind of sign up to be like, okay, I really want to be in on this. Yeah, Next Fest and demos are interesting because I either go all in on the demos or I don't touch them at all. Kind of went with the latter this time around, and I usually just go. I just go like, and I just look through it. Like, I don't really have. I guess I have like stuff wish listed now a lot more on Steam to try to keep up with things I'm excited about, but I actually prefer to just do demos of stuff that like I have not heard of at all. Like I don't really if I have it wish listed, like sometimes I will like dip into a demo, like, oh, like let's just get more information. But I'm like, well, I'd rather just seek out to like gain more to put on my radar. Because if it's rare but not impossible that like if I'm interested in a game and I play the demo that I drop off of it. Sometimes that happens. But usually I'm like, cool, the thing that I thought was cool seems cool. So it's more interesting to me to get the what like if I got the email for Backpack Battles, maybe I didn't see it. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe I jump into that. Or I like the, which is funny because I feel like PR is almost the opposite goal where it's like, oh my god, no, like please look at our game for X, Y, and Z and think about it. But for me hitting like something like Next Fest, I'm like, and even to a degree emails, you look, you get a sense, and if the sense hooks me, I'll look a little further. But I'll bounce off of stuff like ridiculously fast. And I think everyone playing in the space kind of knows that and they try to gear towards that, whether it's like, okay, we need to get a really good quick sense of the game through like this first trailer or through these images or through the name. Everyone's vying for not just attention, but attention from like the right kind of people, like catching your eye, but knowing that like presenting yourself in a way where if that is my sensibility, I'm gonna clock it at in an
Mhm.
instant because I'm just gonna keep scrolling. It's just pages and pages, and you're just gonna
Yeah.
keep on going. But to me, that's also kind of what's exciting about it. But yeah, definitely something interesting to be said that the top 50 isn't like, we talk a lot about on here predicting things, award shows, like notables, what people are into, what's gonna whatever. It's fun to see a list like this where I don't think any of us could have really guessed like what would be on here. Like
Yeah.
maybe you'd get a couple things right, but like I feel like Dungeon Born could have easily just been something else, you know?
Yeah.
And again, maybe I don't have my hand on the pulse of like the Dungeon Born culture that's brewing underneath the surface, you know?
It's real good.
But yeah, it's a wide array like of what kind of crops up on this for what catches people's eye during this and what they're looking for. Like, are people looking to affirm a purchase or are they looking to like experiment and get weird and try stuff out? Like, are they following up or are they finding something new? Like, I'm not really sure how
Mhm.
the general player likes to approach stuff like Next
Right.
Fest.
That's such a cool you brought up 2 things that I'm gonna try to remember, but the first one being that is a very interesting perspective on our lives as content creators versus being players as well, because,
Mhm.
like, there is to some degree a very professional interest that I have in Steam Next Fest in that I need to be checking out, like, what are the big indie things that are here that I need to be covering, that I need to be on the pulse of, um, and usually that does take precedent. I love the idea of, "I've never played this before, I'm gonna check it out," and I get to those, like, 10% of the time, and I hate that that's the truth of it, but I would love to be able to just go, "Oh, this is an interesting thing, let me check this out," because that's so much of, like, keeping your horizons up and, like, covering indies is, like, this little thing no one's ever heard of suddenly becomes this huge, like, sensation, and you can be like, "Yeah, I played that at the Steam Next Fest." Um, so yeah, again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of demos. There's no way anyone could ever play them all. It is so difficult to, like, reach that balance. But you also talked about, like, strategy and wondering whether or not people shoot for something for a demo. So I wanna ask Jenny about that. Like, are
Mhm.
there strategies as far as, like, how you are talking to developers, like, this is kind of how you want to think about a demo? Or for the most part, are they just putting stuff up there?
Like, in terms of the content of the
Yeah,
demo and
because
yeah.
like, I've played a few demos that were beefy, and I'm like, "I don't have an hour to play." Like, I'm really into this game, but I don't have an hour to play.
Yeah, what's really interesting is like the movement from physical demos at conventions where you're sitting there and you have like 15 minutes because you've got appointments, there's a line like of people actually standing, to digital demos, which are now erring on the like minimum 30 minutes, I feel like is sort of the bar now for digital
Mhm.
demos, going up to like 2 hours, sometimes plus, depending on the game. Um, there are definitely recommendations we provide, and it really depends on each game and like what is the loop, because you want players to at least get a sense of the loop as kind of like a mini vertical slice, which is an indication of like what are the main parts of the game and how can we quickly show people so that they can get a sense of if they would actually like the full thing or not. Um, yeah, I know it depends on like how much story do you want to leave in, how much do you want to leave out because you want a cliffhanger. So that there is a science to creating a demo and like figuring out what part to cut from the game. And the one recommendation I always have for developers is like consider avoiding just the beginning of your game, because oftentimes that is not the most fun part.
Mhm.
So if you have
Mhm.
a mission or something that you can cut from just a little bit in, that's often much wiser, but it is pretty variable. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely a science to it.
I love it. I also love how, like, I went into this being like, "Oh, this is gonna be like a 10-minute thing," and then we just went down. Like, this is the fun thing about talking with other people who, like, really love the indie space as well, because you just don't get that a lot of times, so it's just like, yeah, we've now been talking about this for, like, half an hour. And we're gonna continue because we need to talk about our top 3 demos we managed to play. I'm gonna start out with Botany Manor. Oh my
Oh
gosh, I
yeah.
love this game every time I jump into it. Like, it is such a, temptation to only talk about the new games, the games that were, like, the first time you could touch something, um, and I sort of go for that for the rest of my list, but, like, you jump into Body Manor and, like, you can smell the fresh air, you just feel the
Mhm.
relaxation. I'm, like,
Mhm.
sitting down, like, on my stream, maybe not great, but I'm like, "I'm just gonna sit down on this bench, and we're all gonna take a second, we're just gonna breathe, we're gonna listen to the birds, because that's the kinda game this is." And it just recently got announced that it's coming out April the 9th. I'm super excited
A
for it.
Mhm.
Um, Another one on my list, a new game I had not laid hands on yet, Indica is wild.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, I knew this game was wild going in, but I didn't know how it was gonna be wild. So you play as, like, a nun, and you quickly learn that she's been defrocked, and some of the reasons that might be. It also seems like she's in a hostage situation. Don't know how that happened because it's not the beginning of the game, as Jenny, wisely told people to do, so you're sort of in the middle of things. Um there's a as soon as I learned there's a dedicated button to cross yourself in this game, I was like, "What is going on? Why would that be necessary?" And then I started, like, interacting with things, and I, like, light a candle in front of, like, a religious iconography, and, like, I get a golden, very pixelated video gamey type, like, coin thing, and then I can upgrade my, like, my guilt or whatever and get more points, and I'm like, "What is this game?" And then I finally got to a point where, like, hell just opened up, and it was I could go in between that and the real world by praying, and that's how you solve puzzles. I'm like, "Oh, I get it. Okay, I know what this game is now. I understand what the draw it is wild, but I can get my mind around it now. It is so good. It looks beautiful. I'm super into it. I can't wait to see more of it. I hope everybody got to check this out because
Mhm.
I'm so into this."
I want to say the weirdest part was at the very beginning, you're like riding this sort of steam bicycle
Mhm.
or whatever, and it's this serene, sort of snowy scene in like a forest in Russia, and this like song starts playing. And I thought, I was like, what is that other window open? Like, where is the sound coming from? And I realized it was from the game. It's so weird. I loved
Yeah,
it.
it's so weird. The other thing, all of I love, by the way, all of the things on my top list are like completely different from one another. But the last one I really want to shout out is hashtag Blood. And it's BLUD. And this is essentially, if you've not seen this game, this is like uh Powderpuff Girls or Dexter's Lab in game form. So like it hits me really hard in the nostalgia area because that those are my childhood areas of cartoons, and it has that same sort of humor as well, and it lands. Like there's not a single thing in here that didn't land for me. All the jokes are landing. All of them are like I'm getting chuckles left and right. Like it's just it is irreverent and silly but wholesome, like all at the same time, and it just looks so beautifully fantastic. There's combat that's really fun. It like you've got a lot of Zelda like touchstones in there. And essentially you're like you are a young girl, you've just moved to this area, you're trying to make friends, you're like hitting everybody up on Perch, which is like a Twitter, which is hilarious. And then vampires and then vampires. You know, that's really what you need to know about what is happening in this game, and I am so in love with it. I had this on my list. This popped up somewhere. I can't remember if it was like a couple of years ago in a summer game fest or something, but I had this on my list and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be the first time that we're going to be able to go hands on with this." It's great. I love it. If you haven't checked it out, please do.
Nice.
Janet, how are you
Yeah.
feeling?
I'm feeling relaxed because even though I don't sound it, I sound insanely tense. So I feel great. Yeah, I really didn't check out much from Next Fest this time around, but one thing I did make some time for was a game called Rusty's Retirement. This is an idle game, and I feel like it might be my first idle game. I feel like idle games are something I've maybe dipped into, but kind of inadvertently, where I'm like,
Mhm.
oh wait, this is just like you just set it and forget it. I don't think I want to do this. This was one that I was drawn to because this is from a developer named Mr. Morris Games, who worked on another title called Haiku Robot, which is a really cool
Oh
and
yeah,
fun
yeah.
Metroidvania that I admittedly did not finish yet. But I was like, all right, let me come through. This is which is if and I'm sure a lot of people listening are well versed in indies, how to find indies, but definitely if you haven't thought to do it already, if there's like a developer you like, drop them a follow or like check out their studio, like get on that kind of radar. That's how I saw this was up for a demo, was through their Twitter page. And yeah, it's a little idle game where you're this little robot kind of guy walking around and you're watering crops, and it's a little farming simulator essentially. And in the demo, you can work to unlock other kind of structures, like very cutely, you can get like Haiku's house, like from Haiku Robot, like the character from that game. So
Cute.
I love when developers can kind of be self-referential, and I also love how many Easter eggs there are, like indie game to indie game.
Yes.
It's something that's really
Mhm.
fun, and I think kind of unique to the space. Like, I mean, you see AAA crossovers sometimes, but I think those just maybe involve more paperwork
Yeah.
than some of the smaller titles. So yeah, it's cute. It's what I really like about it is that you play it on PC and you can. It's super small. You can kind of change the sizing. The sizing takes about, I think, at biggest, like 1/4 to 1/5 of like a computer monitor screen. So I actually pulled it up now for during the podcast just to have it running in the background. But you can, plant little crops and it's just happening as you do everything. So it's
Mhm.
nice as like it kind of get to me feels like having like a virtual little pet. It has that same kind of energy to it, and I think that's cute and soothing and nice. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what else this developer does with the game, because I was looking through the replies, and they were talking about like maybe setting up different timers, like Pomodoro timers, to kind of make it like a productivity like kind of thing. I think that'd be really smart. So yeah, shout out to Next Fest for also, I think, sometimes offering, for some of these developers, this is the first time a wider player base is experiencing their game and interacting with it and talking to them about it. So can be a good spot for feedback too. And then just some shots I want to do. I didn't play them during Next Fest, but y'all already know I love Cryptmaster.
Mhm.
It's super fun. It's been exciting hearing more people go hands on with it because of the attention of Next Fest, even though it's had a demo before. So that was really cool. Still a really rad dungeon crawler word game, essentially. And then, mainstream in terms of indie games, but Pepper Grinder from Devolver Digital. I'm really excited for that game. You're a character that has like, I don't know if is it her arm or she just holding it? Like it's like
I
a
think like a
drill at the
drill.
end of
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I think she's holding it.
Yeah, I
But
think
we'll
she's just
learn
holding it.
that there's some sort of like horrific lore where
Yeah,
she's
like I
got
don't know,
like an
it's
arm drill.
adhere to her arm. I don't know, but essentially you're kind of swimming through these sand bits. It's a platformer in the sense that you jump, but it kind of has it's all about like the momentum of drilling through these spaces. And in terms of momentum, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Yoko's Island Express. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's not as fast as that because you're more swimming through the sand, but it kind of has a level of trying to get momentum and like kineticism in your movement and using that as like a form of attack and traversal. It just has a lot of personality, and I just like the feel of it generally. This is one that once I went hands on, I was like, cool, I get it. Don't got to play anymore. Looking forward to the big release when that comes out, hopefully later this year. But those are the things that I've been spending my time with in terms of demos.
Okay. So Jenny started typing things out,
I
and
did.
she had like a
I'm
million on
going
her
through.
list. I was like, Jenny, you have to get this down to 3. So what 3 did you finally land on there, Jenny?
I was able to take off some of mine because you all talked about it. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to even mention the stuff that you've already mentioned.
Mhm.
So Crypt Custodian, this is by the developer who made Islets, which was a really charming sort of, I guess it was Metroidvania. And this is building on that knowledge. What I love about this is if you've played his first game, you can tell, you can feel the growth that he's had as a developer and a designer and everything. It just feels great. You play as this cat who has just died and you're in the afterlife and you've been relegated to be banished and become a janitor
Yeah.
in the afterlife, and you
I
got to
mean,
clean
Jenny,
everything up.
I don't wanna, like, gloss over the villain that we
Oh
meet
my
very
gosh.
early on,
Yes.
Pip the Deceiver,
Oh
okay?
my god.
Uh, so keep an eye out for this
Yeah.
creature. Thank
So
you.
everyone watch out for Pip. This is just like if you like Metroidvanias, you like cute games, just check this out. I think this one's really accessible. Like if you also are a person who feels like you have never touched a Metroidvania because you're a bit intimidated, I think this is one that would be a decent one to start on because there's a lot of just like it doesn't necessarily assume you know everything about the genre, which I appreciate. Um, Super charming. I just can't wait. It was one of those two where I played it, and in the first maybe 10 minutes, I was like, yeah, I know I'm gonna like this.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. It's
until
beautiful
then,
too,
oh yeah,
actually.
it's beautiful. Yeah,
So gorgeous.
if you like
Hand-drawn, beautiful painterly art.
people are always like, "Oh, it's Ghibli-esque in the art style," but truly, like, the cat looks very much like if you were watching a slice of life sort of anime almost in
Mhm.
how cute it is. I love it. The other top 3 that I selected was a game called Until Then. I so this game is very slice of life, very narrative and reading heavy. But the way that this game just builds a world using just different bits of text, email, conversation, like it feels incredibly immersive. And what I love is that this is a game that is very slice of life, but like Space for the Unbound, strange
Mhm.
things are happening. And so you get a little bit of that mystery, a bit of that fantasy realism kind of in there. Um, I also love that it's Philippine inspired. I think it's a dev team from the Philippines as well, maybe.
I think so.
I
I believe you're
think,
correct.
yeah.
But that's definitely where the game is set, and it's very,
Yes,
like, if they don't live there, they are very knowledgeable and have some firsthand experience because that's
right.
yeah, coming out. It's coming out in that, demo.
Yes. And I think if you like a slice of life game with a little bit of mystery, I think if you like the anime, what's the one that makes everyone cry? It's
Grave of the
like,
Fireflies? Wait, no, anime. No, it's
oh,
the movie.
it's
That
like
makes
the
everyone
two
cry.
word, oh my gosh.
Doki
Until,
Doki Literature Club.
no, not Doki. Oh my
It'll
gosh.
make
Your
you
Name?
cry, alright.
Your Name. Yeah. If you like
Oh,
Your Name
okay. Yeah.
vibes, like this is the game for you. It is really reading dense. So I would say if you're a person who does not enjoy that kind of digging and like reading, it's probably not going to be as enjoyable. But if you love just feeling like you can immerse yourself in the world, the amount of detail put into this demo, like there's a Facebook sort of stand-in, I forget what they call it, Neat Space, I think it's what it's called. So it's like MySpace, but you can engage with the post, you can retweet, you can share whatever they call in the game.
Uh-huh.
Characters will refer to you and be like, I saw that you liked this post, or I saw you didn't share my post, what was that
Uh-huh.
about? And it's astounding just the level of detail in the mundane sort of activities that you do in the game. And it's not an overtly like telltale your choices matter kind of thing, but it feels very very much like they do. So
Yeah.
loved it, can't wait for more.
This is a
uh
great game. I like, essentially, you're playing day to day. Like, it's supposed to make you think that you're playing day to day, like, I'm going to school, I'm doing
mhm.
projects, I'm talking to girls. But then every once in a while, the game just, like, glitches.
Yeah.
The colors change, the sound is wrong, like, there's something wrong happening in this world,
Mhm.
and I love it.
Yes.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I think what they talk about on the Steam page is, and I can't, Steam is broken for me for some reason. It's not loading on at least a browser. But I remember the Steam description saying something about how like unreliable memories is something that's going to come up a lot in this game. So
Mhm.
I love that. The
Yeah, it's the
final
first
game,
hint that something is going wrong, right, Jenny?
yes,
Like,
yep.
you're in the middle of a presentation and then your person next to you is like, "Oh, it's been raining all week." It's like, "Frick, no, it hasn't. It's been
Yeah.
sunny." It's
Yeah,
like,
and then you,
"What's
like,
happening?"
go outside and you're talking with your friends, and then there's this, like, chromatic aberration. You're just like, "Wait, what? Did I just, like, blink and see funny on the screen?" Because I was playing it at
Right.
night. So I'm like, "Did I
Mhm.
just get too tired?" But no, it's the game. Um, I was tired, but that was just the game. The last one, this was a surprise one. This was one that I actually thought was a different game. And then I downloaded it. I was like, this isn't the game I thought it was. But I kept playing and it was astounding. It's called Cabernet. And it's essentially like adventure game, or kind of like adventure game meets visual novel. You play this woman in sort of the late, I guess, like early 19th century, I suppose, late 18th, early 19th century. And you find out very quickly that you've been turned into a vampire. And the entire game is about learning what to do with your new vampiric powers. And there is sort of two sides of the coin, where you have a humanity sort of point bar and you have a nihilism, I think is what they call it, nihilism point bar. And so everything that you do, how you talk to people and how you treat them, adds and subtracts points, and you level up your vampire level to just get better at, you can turn into a bat and fly, you can drain people of their bloods. So it's pretty, I guess, standard in terms of vampire game, but the voice acting was really good, and the choices, it just felt really compelling. Like, I didn't feel like I was kind of bored with the choices they were giving me and the results of what happened. And so I felt really compelled by the way that they just wrote the game. And I think the writing was just really strong. So if you're looking for a bit of a vampire, maybe there's going to be some romance. I'm not sure. There was relationships in the game. So maybe some romance, maybe not. There's a little bit of political corruption and intrigue as well within vampiric society. So just if you want a little bit of a vampire visual novel choice based game, I would highly recommend Cabernet.
I didn't get to play this one, but this is one that my community was in love with, and I'm really sad that
Mm.
I didn't check it out. Um, so don't make my mistake. Mike actually wrote in some of his top 3 demos, even though should be in bed, not thinking about the world right now. But just to shout those out, it's Balatro. I don't know how to say it.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm trying. This is actually like this is a dangerous game. Essentially, it is a poker roguelike. And what that means is difficult. You're not actually playing poker. You're trying to reach a certain chip amount, and you get points based off of like if you like a straight will give you a certain amount. Just playing like uh, three of a kind or just like a royal flush. I haven't gotten yet, but I'd love to. Um, and you're getting more and more chips versus this. And when you win, you get money and you can add cards into your deck. And not only like playing cards, but jokers, which are your ability cards essentially. They modify like, if you put down this type of card, you get times 3 chips, and you have to get over a certain amount each time you're playing a different round. And if you get to a boss, the boss will have things to mess you up. Like you can only play uh, hands that are a straight instead of anything else, or like the cards you got from the beginning are the only cards you can play the whole time. So hopefully you got like a good hand instead of all twos or something. Uh, it is so, so, so hard to put down because you're just playing. You're like, hey, I'm doing really well. I'm getting all my bonuses. I'm upgrading. Like, you get cards that upgrade types of things. So, like, your three of a kind, you can upgrade. And so you get more points for playing three of a kind. So there were times when I would rather play a three of a kind than a full house. Um, and it felt weird. Like if you're a poker player, you're like that obviously should win, but I would get more points just by playing these 3 and then, like, 2 random things I wanna get out of here. Um, it's funny, it is, like, it's really, really hard to put down because you're just like, Just one more," you know? It is the epitome of just one more. So if you have time, set time aside. This is not a, "I'm gonna play for 15 minutes and see what it's about" game. Uh, the other thing he that I played that he's shouting out here is normal fishing. And that should tell you a lot about what you're about to do. When someone says, "Hey, we're gonna go just, normal fishing, don't worry about it." Like, that's the vibe of this game. So it is a lovely kind of pixelated, like orangey, monochromatic type game. Everything is weird. Nothing is right. You start seeing things and you're like, this seems normal because you're following the normal, like, "Hey, we've moved to a new town and it's your job to make money so that you can upgrade things. So go out and go fishing." But like, nothing's correct. Like the
What does this
interactions you
mean?
have, with people are just like, your wife isn't human in some way. Like, those are
Ah.
not the sentences that come out of a human brain. Why are you saying this? What is happening? Like, the person who's fishing, like, someone gets lost out at sea or like stuck because they don't have an oar. I'm like, I hope that person is not dead. I could have helped them, but I didn't have enough money to get the oar from like, there are things like in the text that harken back for me to things like, all your base are belong to us, but like they're like intentional mistranslations of a game that came out in Japan 500 years ago. But like, this is a new game that's like English speaking, so like, it's an intentional thing just to mess with you. And I'm like, you're reading it, you're like, is this a typo? No, they meant for me to say it and sound stupid. So, and it's really fun when you go fishing. You are trying to not catch junk, but you can catch junk, and the fishing is not normal, spoilers. And yeah, it's just so bizarre and so fun. It's so cool, and I want people to go check this out. I love it. This is definitely a Mike joint. Of course, he put this in his top 3. I might have put this in my top 3 if I'd not seen him put it on his. Um, yeah, Mike, I love this. What I don't love, Mike, if you want to come on the show and push your weird games, then you can do that. But having it so that we have to talk about your creepy mouth washing game, I don't
Yeah, let's
appreciate
get
it.
into it. Also, your
So
description of normal fishing was like, I can't imagine the game being better than what that description was, because you were like,
please go in and
"Look, you're
enjoy.
doing it, but something's
Oh,
off." I'm like,
it's so good.
"This your
Um,
stretch? Like, maybe, I don't know."
yeah, it's got a
Scary
little bit
fishing
of,
it's having a moment, I
yeah,
think.
Mhm.
mouth washing according
Yeah.
to the Steam description, which I'm glad I brought up because Steam, like Jenny said, is not working anymore. It says the 5 crew members of the Tulpar are stranded in the empty reaches of space, shrouded in perpetual sunset. God is not watching. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know what that means. It's creeping me out.
Yeah, and it's from
Uh,
the team behind, what is it, How Fish Were Made, right? So if
oh
you're
yes,
familiar with that, then
it's not.
there
It's
you
not right.
go. Pile it on.
A narrative-driven first-person horror game following the dying crew of a shipwrecked space freighter. Like, if that sounds like your jam, and if you trust Mike's choices, we don't know. Go check that one out as well.
I
And
will say I played it. It's not necessarily my game. I will say though, it's not a jump scare game. So if folks
okay,
are like, I want to try it, but I don't like the jump scary games. I'd rather have the atmosphere and the tension. This is more atmosphere, tension. It's grotesque. It'll make you like it'll definitely make you squirm. It's not pleasant, but I didn't find it to be jump scary, which is what I hate. So if that entices you at all,
there
there
you
you
go.
go.
Ringing endorsement from Jenny Wyndham. And with that,
Oh man.
like almost an hour into this podcast, we're getting to our second news story. The Dice Awards are happening. They're probably
Yay.
happening
Woohoo.
the day this podcast comes out. Maybe it's already happened depending on where you're listening to this, but they are happening February the 15th at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So let's jump into this. Going into an award ceremony, this is the first big sort of award ceremony since the Game Awards. And obviously, big backlash there for not really focusing on awards. So I'm very interested to see if more people are going to be checking this out. Like, what do you guys think? Is it more the backlash was happening then and people will have died down with interest on Game Awards, or are people going to be watching this specifically to pump the numbers?
I think it'll be more, but I think it'll be ultimately a negligible difference. But I do think,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the like content media space, especially people that maybe do like live react streams, I think it's like more likely to see like some outlets that maybe didn't do that before might, take part. And by outlets, I mean kind of running the gambit in terms of size and teams. Like, I know, like we talked about, like potentially doing that over at MinMax, and the only reason we didn't is because like the people that were interested in doing it just are not available during that time. But I think yeah, you'll see a bit more, but maybe not enough to like, I don't know, make a huge difference. But like, I think the vibe will be, oh, let's show out to like support Dice, like a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we'll have to see. We'll see if that gets a huge bump or not. I'm very interested to see what the discussion is around there, the discourse, if you will. I'm also very interested to see. Obviously, Dice Awards is looking back at 2023, um, but considering like the news just popped out today that PlayStation isn't really looking at a huge slate for its first party games, and I feel like we've had similar things come out like of Xbox, and like it is early in the year. We're not hearing a lot of exciting news for things, obviously, because people usually don't announce things early in the year. But looking at 2023's set of awards and categories, it's like categorically AAA. Like the Game Awards was not a diverse set of games this year. It was dominated by a few very big games. I am very interested to see if going into 2024 awards, if indies are going to be dominating. What do you think, Jenny?
I mean, just by being on this podcast, I'm more likely to say probably that I think indies might dominate. I do think that we have this interesting situation where a lot of games, like a lot of the heavy hitters, were delayed until last year, and they all launched last year, like for the most
Mhm.
part. And so now we had this like almost bottleneck of games, and now we're almost at a point where everyone, if they're going back into production making another big game, it's like they're in the works, but it's like that's going to be another like, I don't know, 3 to 5 year cycle, right? That like these things take a long time to make. So I imagine that's definitely a huge element and part of it, where just timing wise and the way that launches have happened, like there's no way they could push out more AAAs. And also everything happened at the same time. Whereas if we had had a different timeline, they would have been more spread out probably. So I think that's still definitely a thing. I'm curious too, just especially we'll talk about a little later, but later with the layoffs and sort of like the person power in each of these companies and like where that's landing and how that's affecting production. So I think just by default, we'll probably see more attention being paid to indies, and like that double A space, I guess, where indies are kind of now moving into, like a few of the studios are moving into. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year.
I'm down. Okay. So let's focus back in on the DICE Awards specifically. There are a few categories that we're looking at being interested in independent games, including the Outstanding Achievement for an Independent Game category. So this one is good. If anyone wins, I'll be happy. Like, I have
Mhm.
no idea really who to vote for here, but we're going to try to predict the winners. Games for this category include Cocoon, Dredge, El Paso Elsewhere, Thirsty Suitors, and Venba. Janet, where are you feeling for this list?
I think Venba. I feel like it has the no shade to everybody else because there's a lot of passion in the, especially Thirsty Suitors. I think Thirsty Suitors is also like up there, just in terms of I think heart, but also the delivery. You know, I definitely don't want us to be so focused on talking about like how many cool sociological vibes come out of Venba that we lose sight of like the fact that it's a brilliantly made game. I think the gameplay is like really entertaining. I think Venba is a fantastic example of what a narrative game can and should be and what gameplay looks like in a narrative game. I think there's an incredible amount of cohesion in every facet of what makes a video game, all in conversation with each other within Venba in a way that you don't get that often, honestly. And I feel like, again, DICE is an award show of peers, you know, developer to developer. I think a lot of that is going to land. While some of these other, you know, and all the titles are great that are listed here, at least, you know, debatably so. Like they're all been in top of mind, I think, indie titles, and that's why they're all nominated. So obviously, like, there's love for all of these, but I feel like Venba is going to have that biggest splash. That's where my gut says, but I could make a case for most of these winning. It's just the case I choose to make is the Venba one, and maybe that's because it's what I would pick, but I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm not a developer. What do y'all think?
What are you thinking, Jenny?
I'm also on the Venba train.
Yeah.
I love, just personally, I love Venba so much. I think it's an outstanding game for all the reasons Janet mentioned. I feel bad because the one game I did not really play more than about an hour of was El Paso Elsewhere. So I feel like I haven't gotten like the full sense of maybe what that game could provide. I know that everyone's been saying like singing its praises, and so I feel bad because I know the least about that one, but they're all really good games. This is tough. But Venba just has my heart.
Yeah.
It's just
I mean,
so good.
it's scary because anybody who watched our last winner predictions awards edition, Jenny got all of them. She literally
Yeah.
did not miss. So my instinct was not Venba, but I am looking at like I don't know if this is just like the easy answer, but I'm looking at Cocoon because
Hmm.
obviously it is visual, audio, design, absolute stunner. I I can't think of a better designed game last year really. It was well, I mean, maybe I could, but Cocoon is so good. I do also want to give a shout out to El Paso Elsewhere because that I, like Jenny, I didn't play all the way through this game. So I have not had all of the like emotional hits of it. But the opening where it's just like it is getting me to believe in this world and it's looking me in the eye and telling me I have to believe like as the player, like that is an emotional hit that I don't know if any
Mhm.
of these other games hit so hard. Like Venba hits hard in f- feeling an emotion and feeling isolated and feeling like an outsider. But like El Paso Elsewhere looked me in the eyes and was like, "This game will not work unless you believe. So I'm gonna count to 3. And if you believe, it's gonna happen." And I'm like, I literally believed that if I didn't believe hard enough, the game would just end. You know, like that's an amazing
That
thing.
sounds really cool. I also
Yeah.
didn't
It's
spend time with El Paso
it's
elsewhere,
really
but
cool. So I'm just gonna put my heart out there and say El Paso Elsewhere. That's where I'm
Mhm.
going.
I mean, I do think there's something to be said about the fact that El Paso elsewhere didn't appear on a lot of the other like nominations of things we looked at, and by that I mean Game Awards. Like, it's like I'm really just thinking of
Mhm.
one other one,
Mhm.
but I feel like there's something to be said about that. Like, maybe you're right. Like, maybe the energy is there in a way that it hasn't been in other spaces. Not that El Paso hasn't gotten plenty of flowers around the
Mhm.
that kind of award season or end of the year wrap ups, like definitely has been highlighted by a lot of places. But I do think it's interesting to see it on here because a lot of times it might not even be on the nominations list. So I do think there's
Right.
clearly a lot of love for that game within
Yeah.
the committee, or I don't know how exactly
The
Dice
committee.
breaks it down. It's other developers, but I don't know like what that looks like if they just like email studios and everyone fills out a form. I don't know, but the people that decide seem to be passionate about it.
I think on that vein too, El Paso Elsewhere and Thirsty Suitors, I think, had it hard for the Game Awards because the cutoff, they came
Mhm.
in on time, but I don't know if people had enough time to, like, sit with them and, like, because it was sort of the end of the year rush, you gotta get a lot of other things in. So I think maybe that it helps that the DICE Awards is in February of the next year, so everyone can have time to sit down and really play these games. Um, so yeah, we'll see. We will see what happens if I lose everything and Jenny wins everything.
No, you know what? I believe in you, Jill. I
Thank
think
you.
maybe this is your time. Maybe you're like spot on, and we're just here fangirling over Venva
If I could go
when we
up on
could be.
stage and like make the case for my
Yeah.
winning, like, maybe it would happen. Um,
Yeah, just rush
Mike
the
shouted
stage.
out,
That's what Dice is missing.
yeah, Mike shouted out the mobile game of the year as a category, so I do want to go over that really fast. Uh, Gubbins is number one.
Yeah.
Hello Kitty Island Adventure, Honkai Star Rail, Terra Nil, and What the Car are all on there. Obviously, Mike is Gubbins Gang Rise Up. Is there anybody who wants to go for another game? Because I mean, Terra Nil and What the
The
Car are
Terranil
both
is
really good, like, possibilities.
Hmm. I mean, I like Terranil. I didn't play it on mobile, so I can't speak to how it feels there, but I did
Mhm.
like Terranil. Um, Honkai Star Rail, I feel like everyone's telling me I need to play that game, and I'm refusing because I'm like, I just can't. I don't have the time. I
Yeah.
don't have the time or money. Um, but yeah, so I'd go for Terra Nil just because I'm like, yeah, I'm a fan of that game.
Okay.
I'll go for Honkai because I keep same
Mhm.
deal. I keep hearing about it. So like someone's screaming it into the void and I do think that like I mean all the other games are cool and stuff, but like I don't know. Like I guess I'm also trying to wrap my head around like is this just like the best game on because
Yeah.
I love Gubbins, but it's like is Gubbins like rocking the world? Like I feel like Honkai does, but like maybe that's popularity versus like critical acclaim. Like those are two
Hmm.
different things. So, but I'll say Honkai for now. But
Okay.
Jill, what's the actual answer? Because this is
I'm
your
Yeah.
joining Mike in the Gubbins gang. Like, I
hell yeah. I
I
love
Nice.
think
Gubbins.
that as far as, like, what Jenny said about I love Terra Nil. I have not played it on mobile, and I don't know if it plays well because that's a
Hmm.
complicated game with a lot of different systems going on.
Yeah.
So the fact they put it on mobile, like, hats off. You did it. That's fantastic. What the Car, I'm sure works well. That is, like, from the creators of all the, like, What the Bad and What the Golf. It is a kind of game that lends itself well to being in the palm of your hand. Um, but also I'm with Janet on, like, did anyone come out talking about that? Did that explode? I don't know. So I'm going with Gubbins on this one. Come on, Mike. Don't steer me wrong. uh, and then I haven't even put the other games for Game of the Year on here. I just have Cocoon. So it's less a prediction and more of a like, do we predict Cocoon has the shot that Mike thinks it has to get Game of the Year at the DICE
Oh,
Awards?
the shot? I'd be shocked if it was Cocoon. Like, I mean, it's going up against like it's a heavy stack of titles. You know, we got like Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3,
Yeah.
Spider-Man, Tears of the Kingdom, like Cocoon is like we do that meme of like the giant like creature and the one guy with a little sword. Even though in that meme structure, that's who wins. So like I don't know, maybe it would be apt, but yeah, and I think too, like I don't know, and I don't like playing the indie versus AAA in terms of like who has the most heart and the true art. You know, I think there's art coming from all spaces within gaming.
Yeah.
That being said, there's some cases to be made here with some of these other like in terms of, I mean, you want to talk about artistry? Like people have written so much and talked so much about like Baldur's Gate 3 and what it's done, how it's moved the neat. Like
Hmm.
you know, even trying to look at it from a more pretending I was someone that made games and could appreciate games at a different angle than like me as a critic. Like I even in
Mhm.
that angle, I feel like a lot of these other titles will probably elbow out Cocoon for Game of the Year. As much as Cocoon is very much, you know,
Hmm.
really well designed, like you said, Jill. Like there's a lot of brilliance in the simplicity of Cocoon. Like Cocoon very much feels like a game that you'd roll out in like a college course about game dev and be like, oh,
Mhm.
let's talk about why this works and how it works so well and what they did. But
Right.
it's just the competition, I think, is too fierce for Cocoon to make it. But like, shout out
Yeah.
to what, the little guy, right? Is that the award that
Yeah.
that was given out?
Our
Just a
little
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 guy.
guy.
guy, yeah.
Yeah, little guy.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that Mike's optimism might be fueled by whatever sickness he's undergoing at the moment. Um,
I gotta get some of that.
yeah,
I know.
I would love to see it. I'm absolutely rooting for it to win. And it's not so completely out of left field if it were to win, because like the Game Awards is um more popular opinion, more like content creators and journalists and that sort of thing. Whereas the Dice Awards are the makers of games looking at other makers of games and looking at all those threads behind the scene that we don't usually think about in that way. Cocoon is absolutely gorgeously designed. No, there is no argument there. But like when you come up to like a Baldur's Gate 3, which is an astounding work. Like I can't even imagine the amount of just writing they had to do for that game. Same thing with like Tears of the Kingdom. Like being able to do all of that, all of the things you can do in that game, everywhere you can do it in that game. Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough one for Cocoon, but I really love seeing it here. And I think that's it for we're finally past news, everybody. Congratulations, we did it.
Woohoo.
Uh
Yay.
so we are currently recording on Valentine's Day. So I want our topic of the show to be inspired by the patron saint of game writing, Rebecca Valentine.
Yay. Go, Rebecca.
What
Yay,
if we
she's
did this
amazing.
every year?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like, what are you even writing
This is
about?
the new tradition.
The Indie
Rebecca,
Council lore deepens.
Yeah.
yes.
We're not.
Reb wrote an article looking at sort of we've seen the perspective of companies and PR firms and investors and things on what's happened with all of the layoffs going on this year. Reb, however, has decided to talk to the actual people involved to see what's going on behind the scenes, how that's affecting them. It is absolutely required reading. I will put the link to this article everywhere. Everyone should read it. It is so important for what's happening in our industry, AAA and indie alike. Um, and so I wanted to take inspiration from that and talk about layoffs as a kind of personal, as it touches us as people, sort of thing. So my first, no one out there can see the doc, but usually when I write a doc, I have a bunch of questions. My first question being, what are our stories? Because that's going to be the most prevalent thing here. And I want to jump in very quickly. I know that people who follow the Indie Informer know this, and they've probably heard this story a million times. But the Indie Informer is a response to layoffs that happened at Game Informer. The Indie Informer doesn't exist without the layoffs, and very possibly in a probable way, my games career probably doesn't exist without layoffs either, which is a bizarre place to be if you think about it. Um, Game Informer had its first layoffs in 2019. And like a huge swath of the staff was let go. And as I had been an intern, as a large fan, it hit in a way that these were sort of the first major layoffs in the game writing space of this kind. Like it was before this wave of layoffs really started. It almost kind of feels like it kicked it off. But I know that there have always been layoffs and that's always been a thing. But it got a response unlike we are currently seeing, because we'll talk about layoff fatigue later, but I feel like there is some version of that. So um, I was brought on to the Game Informer team a couple of years after the layoffs when we could start building back up. And then a year into my term as a Game Informer, layoffs again hit the office, and I was actually not laid off. Like I was not directly laid off, um, but it is so hard. Like obviously, everybody knows that layoffs are a terrible thing. It is hard. Like, how are people going to make a living? Like, how do you go into work every day being afraid that your job's just not going to exist? Um, it is hard on both sides. Like, the people you are losing, it is almost like, um, it is almost like we almost were having like eulogies for people. You know, we were like being on podcasts and having content, and we're just like, we don't feel like doing anything. We're just going to play games and chat with everyone because, like, we can't do anything else. Rufus is trying to make me feel
Your
better.
cat is
Like, I
so
don't know if
sweet.
everybody is watching this, but, like, he can sense my emotions have gotten a little high here. So he's like, "You're okay, Jill."
So cute.
Before he jumped on your head too, he was like moving so fast in front of the camera.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was just an
Um,
orange blur.
So that it is. I can't imagine what it's like to be laid off. I've not yet had this happen to me. Having been a person who like you go into a day and you think it's going to be a normal day. You are in Slack, you're typing to people, you're having fun, and then you get called into a meeting and it's like, "Oh, some of the people that you are like trauma bonded with," I guess is the best way to talk about how games writing works, are just gone, and you don't get to say goodbye, and you don't get to wish them luck, and you never get to see them again. They're just not there anymore. And you're looking around trying to figure out like who isn't here anymore. It is a terrible, terrible feeling to realize that that's just how they decided to do this. That's just what they decided. Like, ugh. And so when that happened, I couldn't work at Game Informer in the same way anymore. Like Game Informer meant so much to me, that I didn't want to be there and be resentful and angry. Um, so I left and I started the Indian Farmer, and that's essentially what happened. There was a lot of stuff uh, going on in between there, and um, it is weird because I love the Indian Farmer. I'm having like the greatest time of my life checking out all of these indie games. I called it the Indie Informer because that was sort of my nickname at Game Informer. Like any chance I got to talk about indies, I did. And even chances were not given to me, I still kind of stole opportunities. But I'm not the only person here connected to a Game Informer layoff, strangely enough. Janet, as our representative of MinMax, do you want to talk a
Hello.
little bit about MinMax creation and sort of what's going on over in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it feels weird to be um like the representative in the sense that like it wasn't my experience, but and I kind of witnessed the Game Informer layoffs from the outside looking in as just someone else in media seeing it happen. It very much is like it's if you've been following media layoffs or developer layoffs, like they all happen like in the same when they're mass to some degree, the same like crummy way of like the bodies kind of just slowly start dropping and then people will like do their posts online. It's like a very like toxic slow rollout that happens. So we are kind of bore witness to that, and did the retweets and sent the good luck and all that, and then seeing Ben Hansen, who's like the owner founder of MinMax, say, hey, like boom, I'm launching this new thing, Patreon kind of company. Yeah, it was really cool, and it's like I think Ben, again, I don't want to speak too much to like Ben's vision and like why he does what he does. So I guess it's an opportunity to, I think, continue creating in the space, but also create opportunities for other people on your own terms. Like that's how I, at least, again, I'll just speak to like my perspectives. That's how I view like the sort of solo journeys. And I think everyone that is on a solo journey arrives to that at different points. Like sometimes your hand was forced, sometimes you took it upon yourself, sometimes it's a little bit of a mix, right? Like a lot of thought goes into making a decision like that. And I think um at least for myself, and I think a lot of people that I've worked with holistically, we value not just creating for our own sake, but also like collaborating with other people. I mean, it's one reason that like all of us are here doing this show, like because there's something that we get out of being together that we don't get alone. So I do think, having to then carve your own area is tough in the sense that like, well, if you want that, you can just like go the traditional route, but it's like, well, maybe you're not getting something in the traditional route that you want, whether it's, stability, whether it's like getting to do a certain kind of work and coverage. Because to your point, Jill, yeah, like a lot of, and again, I've said this on the show before, but I think a lot of people don't realize how much like what a lot of people like to do is like not even their like actual job at like the thing that like I think people see like, oh, you
Mhm.
work at like this outlet or for this, YouTube channel or for whatever. And they're like, cool, you must just be doing the cool things that you talk about. But like, what you don't talk about is all the uncool stuff that maybe goes
Mhm.
into part of it, or the ways that like, oh, why wasn't I at a certain thing, or why wasn't I on that? Like there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that like people don't know about. And I think what I've experienced as someone that's like now part of like the Min-Max team, and like funnily enough, I guess I'm like at all these like post layoff companies, because I also do some work with Remap, which is was created after Vice laid off the Waypoint team. So it's like, okay, the dust settles, and I'm when y'all pick it up from the ashes, I come up and I pull through, So obviously, there's I guess another way to be part of things too, where like I have my own stuff, but I also have joined like other people's kind of solo spaces that they're building. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like the thing that I always talk about with whether it's like layoffs, whether it's like worker mistreatment or whatever the case may be, like I personally have always really valued, especially like now that I've been doing it for a while, of like kind of being freelance or a contractor, however you want to call it, like I can't, you can't fire me. I don't have a job. Like it's like there's such a great freedom in that, and obviously there's cons too. Like I have to do a lot of things on my own. I don't have the same stability. I start looking long term, and it's like, how am I going to retire? How am I going to do this? There's plenty of ways to I think spiral, and I know because I have done those. But on the other side of that coin is the freedom and the creativity and the not having to like, what if I could work without the BS, And I'm not saying these places are perfect, like, oh, everything runs like completely smoothly, but it has far less of the issues I think you sometimes can experience from like a more corporate setting, because everyone that's doing the work knows what the work is and likes the work. There's not like someone that, oh, well, at the above you is like two rows of company, and like, well, they said this thing, and I'm sorry, they're telling, there's not like the same kinds of pressures that you might have from a more traditional outlet in terms of like hitting certain quotas. You can avoid the infinite growth model that I think is plaguing a lot of places that has caused these layoffs.
Yep.
Anyway, I could kind of go on forever about it, but I think at the core, that's sort of been, from someone just sort of experiencing it tangentially, the beauty of having like your own thing is like you can do it how you want, and you can make it how you want, and sure, that's its own kinds of pressure, but it's like no one's gonna tell me I can't do what I want to do. Like I'm gonna, make it work for myself and put in the effort that's gonna take to make it viable. And you kind of you just get control. You get to fail. If you fail, it's on your terms. No one's gonna take it away from you. And I think there's something really cool and exciting and empowering in that. And I'm just also always pro people fucking leaving their jobs. So I'm always plugging people, like aftermath, like all those. When I see people crop up and do their own thing, I get such an excitement because there's so much work and bravery that goes into it. But I think it also is often a response to a lot of BS. And it's like, cool, like you're out there, and like I know you're happy with it, at least in the moment. I don't know if it'll work out long term. Like we don't know the future, but it's like there's such an excitement and an energy, because I think people just really love, you're in this industry because you love it. You're not in it for any other reason, because it doesn't provide a lot of other things
Yeah.
well. But I think we have a strong passion for what we create. So anyway, that's my
That's
that's my
so well
rant.
said, Janet. It's just like you're in it for the fashion because it doesn't provide a lot else.
No. And that's why it's like, so you're telling me like I'm also not going to be happy? I'm already not getting my like that, and that's I think why a lot of people are like I'm dipping on this, because if I am going to sell out, I can sell out for way more money in any other industry. So like what am I doing here? And like I think it's a scary question that a lot of people might not be able in a position to ask themselves even that question, because you're like, look, I'm just kind of trying to do it. So yeah, it's really cool to see, you Jill, and everybody that's done it, like break out and do their own thing, like, as a response to the messed up stuff that
Yeah.
continues to happen.
I do I do wanna shout out the other side of that, though, is, like, the unfortunate reality is that most people who will lose their jobs can't branch out. Like,
Yeah.
most people stay afloat. Like, I know MinMax has a great Patreon and a great community, and same thing with the Indian farmer. Um, staying afloat, actually, like being able to do this and pay the bills is very difficult. It's difficult to do in a quote unquote stable job, like at a big outlet.
Mhm.
Um, again, like the passion and not much else provided is such a good line. I'm going to keep that in mind. Um, So, it is great to see people like shaving off and doing their own thing, and we have seen this time and time again. That is a huge um promoter what's the word I'm looking for? It is a good reason for people going out and creating independent media, and you get a lot more diversity of thought and opinion, and you see so many other games covered. Um but you don't get to hear from the people who don't get to speak again. And
Yeah.
that's terrifying, that we're losing that. We're losing people from this industry that should not be leaving it. Um, but I do wanna hand it over to Jenny. What is your story, Jenny? What is your personal touchstones here?
Um, I think what's really interesting is I've never personally experienced a layoff, and so a lot of what has happened as a result of witnessing really a lot of my friends and colleagues losing their livelihoods, being put in positions where they've had to choose to leave the industry. I think what's been most profound, I guess, is this hardening that I've really noticed over the past 2 years in particular. I've always been very like, a company is not your family. A job is a job. Like, separate
Mhm.
it. Do not, like, be passionate about what you do, but do not let that override your sense of self protection at the behest of whatever corporation or company you're working for. But that has become even more like crystallized in these last few years where, I like right now, I love the places I am working. But I have very intentionally like put my like eggs in multiple baskets, so to speak. And I also have become very, very just aware of like where I'm putting my time and energy, and where I am not, and especially in regards to a company. And it's like you can love where you work, but understand at the end of the day, if you're working for a company, they want profit. Like, that is it. And what's been interesting is also because I do mentorship work, and I also just added someone to my team over the last year, and the ways that I've seen myself mentor people who are trying to come into the industry, and also the advice I'm even giving to the person who's on my team, I'm much more transparent and just like, in some ways I think maybe harsher, in just being more blunt about the realities of what we're facing and how people need to protect themselves should they choose to work for a company, in this time right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I am interested too. You touched a little bit about like hiring, and I don't hire. Um, I don't have that money. I don't have unless y'all want to sign up for my Patreon, go for it. Um, but I get a astounding number of people writing to me saying they would like to. I didn't think it was going to be one of the things I had to contend with was to tell people who want to work for me to tell them you no, I can't pay you, and you should not be asking. Like, because on some level I do understand because I started out as an intern, and like that's how I got into this job, into this industry. But, like, there is a wave of people who are so, like, specifically qualified for what we do, who are looking. I saw recently someone, I can't remember who, maybe it was Polygon, put up um,
Mhm. The games
a
editor
job,
post? Yeah.
like a games editor job, and, like, the
Hmm.
amount of people I have seen, like, sharing that and, like, interested in that, I'm like, "That's gonna be the who's who of." I don't know how they're gonna pick someone,
Hmm.
because you have all of these people who are so qualified for that.
It's like the
Good luck
market
to
is
everyone.
almost yeah, the market's almost stunted at this point because any job posting that gets put up, like even when we were hiring for my team, it was before a lot of the mass layoffs, but still there were a couple that we had already. And it's like I was sending no's and rejections to people who I'm like, you would honestly be amazing at this job. There's just too many qualified people at this point. And so
Mhm.
it's like the stunting comes from having too many qualified people applying to entry level or like basic, almost manager positions where they're taking the spots from people who are trying to come up into the industry too. It's just it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, because like, how do you, I like say I'm a new like just graduated from college and I like games and I want to write about games, and I'm going to go apply for a new editor job. And how am I sitting there like I'm pretending like you do it in an office, but most of the time it's like webcam. But like I'm sitting there like looking around at the waiting room and like famous names from across the industry as game writers are sitting in that office with me. Like, how do I uh, compete with that? Like, already known quantities of people who are doing great work.
Mhm.
So it is very, I don't know what to think is going to happen in because I'm speaking mostly about like the writing games writing journalism side of things, but like it's going to be the same thing with like development, right? They're either going to go off and like make their own thing, or like you're not going to be getting the jobs that you were for a while. So like we get the same, like on one hand we get like a larger diverser set of voices because they're just doing their own thing, and but in the like codified outlets and like big name people, do we get more and more of the same thoughts because the same people are going to be able to get those jobs?
I mean, oh man, there's actually this is like deep industry talk. I feel like there was an article that came out, I believe it was Polygon, on the gender funding gap and the gender pay
Yes,
gap in the industry. And I feel like that is a really, if any, I'll have to get the link and we can put it in the show notes. If anyone
100%.
wants to read it, it is a must read, I think, that shows the disparity. And I think what's really unfortunate is a lot of the people who are leaving, like at least from the development side, a lot of the people who aren't able to stay are the voices that are more marginalized typically. And so not only are we losing those voices, but now like there's definitive monetary proof that we're also not funding those voices, even those who are here. And so I feel like we are going to see this gap widen, unless more places in the industry do something specific about reversing and changing this trend.
Yeah,
But yeah, you just reminded me of that article. It's such a good
very
read.
good.
Yeah.
It is Polygon, and it is by another beloved writer, Nicole Carpenter.
Yes.
Um, so go check that out. As far as like day to day things, like actual practical things that are changing and you can see kind of changing in your spheres, um, I think for me, I recently just had a situation where I don't want to like call someone out if they're not ready for like this kind of attention, but someone I knew was going to GDC and giving a talk at GDC that had to cancel because they
I
were
saw that
let
too.
go,
Hmm.
and because they can't go to San Francisco. It's so expensive to attend and to just stay there for a day, let alone like flying and all of that jazz. So like we're literally missing out on a talk that I was planning on attending and very excited for because like people are losing their jobs in this market right now. Is there anything else y'all can think of off the top of your head?
I mean, I've had friends who, because it's been so many months, they've had to make the choice to leave the industry. I've had friends in sort of community management say, "Hey, I'll maybe keep looking, but I need to get a job. So at this point, I'm going to take whatever I can get." And so I think again, it's just more of seeing the knowing that this was coming at some point, but seeing people actually make those final calls to step away, I think is what I've witnessed the most recently.
Yeah, I think too there is a very interesting. I touched a little bit on layoff fatigue and just like it is difficult, like as a human being, as someone who this has touched, and as a fan of this industry as well. Um, on one hand, I want to keep my mental health, uh, and I- and constantly being like week after week after week. Like it's only February, and I can't even count the amount of people who have been let go. Um, it is tough to keep up and to keep that level of when I first heard Game Informer was going to have layoffs in 2019, I was outraged and doing things, and I was out there and proactive, and I was speaking and voting with my wallet and all the things you're supposed to do. And now it's just like it's not a feeling of like uh, so what? Like it's not that, but it's like I don't have the marbles. I don't have the spoons available to be that upset all the time. And it makes it hard to cover because like can we on this show on our podcast every week is the topic of the show going to be another layoff? Like are we going to be like does that mean that layoffs now are just a thing that is getting less spotlight? Is there more we can be doing? Just to like not be so doom and gloom about it. Like I do want to point out there are responses that are happening to this that are really good. Like IGN is
Mhm.
unionizing. That's amazing. That is a huge outlet, and for that kind of like heavy hitter to be moving in that direction, to see other things, other outlets and other people being able to do that as well is probably in the future. But what do y'all think about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I feel like there's good lines that I could pull out, but I don't remember any of them. But I mean, ultimately, like it's about, I think, finding ways to maintain hope, and I think part of that comes from like something that in an opposite end of the spectrum that like Jenny talked about, where I feel that too. Like the longer I exist, maybe it's just part of existing in the world as like, a left leaning person. Maybe it's part of like seeing how the different economic shifts that have taken place over the years that we've like existed on this planet. But yeah, definitely I enjoy partaking in a healthy dose of, the F capitalism go home mantra that Remap and Waypoint has. And I do have a lot of that in me. So it's like, I guess, in that way, sometimes, hatred's another emotion. Sometimes that can be used for good. It's like I have a strong feeling in that regard of like how the world works and how I operate in it as a result. But also, I think on the other end of the spectrum of like workers, being done wrong, there's also like the power behind the labor
Mhm.
movement. And I think stuff like this, like and that's why I do get so hyped about like seeing people do independent things. I do get so hyped about seeing things like unionization. Like IGN is like one of the most like traditional long form, not long form, but like long standing outlets in the games media industry, if not like the one, especially like with the one that's currently active and like still active through all these years. So to see something that is so traditional, so like often old guard, finally do this. Like I never would have thought that this would ever happen at a place like IGN for like a number of reasons. So seeing that, like, obviously they have a lot of hurdles in front of them. They're still like fighting for like recognition from like Ziff Davis. So, shout to Ziff Davis. After Ziff Davis, man, I fucking hate Ziff Davis. But who likes the company that owns their company that owns the other company, right? Like that's how it goes. So they have a lot ahead of them, but like that's a huge deal, and like other people are taking note of that. I would always like say, and really a lot of places that you are, no matter how small or how big, like people are looking to you. Like even at a small scale, like people look at what you're doing, Jill, and they're like inspired by that and moved by that, and it makes them feel a certain type of way. And like people are looking at like the things happening at IGN, and that's creating conversations that maybe weren't going to happen, or that's like, hey, like, that's like that's energy, and that to me is the hope that I hold on to keep me going in the world. Which sounds like, I don't know, it's kind of dark and a little sad in some ways, but I think that's what we have, and that's what I hope that we can see on the other end of the spectrum. Like obviously it's terrible for these things to be happening, but labor movements have always happened throughout history, and there's a lot of evidence that there's positive momentum in workers organizing. There was literally just today, like not in our industry at all, but like they had the Lyft, Uber, DoorDash
Mhm.
strike, which they have a much harder fight because of the kind of workers they are. They cannot unionize because they're like under I forget the details of like what kind of contract they are, right? But there's
Mhm.
people out there like fighting the good fight, and that's like it's like and it's silly, but it's kind of what like why Rogue One was like a cool Star Wars movie, right? It's about like how this a small group can have like a big impact. Now, obviously, like spoilers, they died, so like that's scary. But like, you know what I mean? Like, the
Hopefully it
energy's
doesn't
there.
happen that way for IGN. Sorry.
Like, but the energy's there, and it's about like
Mhm.
holding on to that. Like, all we really have is like hope at the end of the day, and like that's why I like writing. Like, writing is the closest thing we have in communication. Is the closest thing we have to magic here on Earth. It can
Mm.
do so much, and I feel like those posts, those signatures, like it's energy, it's momentum. I don't know if it's gonna shake out the way we want it to, but I know I felt really good that day, and I know the workers there probably also felt like really good about like that feeling. It's about getting those like little incremental wins, because I think if you get too focused on the big picture, you will spiral into an abyss
Yeah.
a little bit.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's what I try to hold on to. But yeah, it's definitely tough, and it's how do you cover it without being numb, but also I think adding value to like listeners and like what we can do to propel these conversations forward in a way that's not just that happened and like that's unfortunate, and I'm which that is a tough thing, Jill, and I don't have a great answer for that, but it's something that I think Jenny, you bring in things like the article that contextualizes the funding gap. To me, I guess like looking inward at how can we step up the kind of coverage we do so that we're continuing that energy, having those conversations, but also adding an additional layer of value that a listener can't get on their own or might not have time to gather on their own. And that can be, you know, what we contribute that isn't just, I don't know, like here's another one of these, which some weeks it might be a little quick hit, but I think it warrants spending additional time on when we can from a new angle.
Mm. I think what really stands out to me is like there's resiliency and power and also just like community, like the labor movement. It's about community. It's min max, for example, it's a community of people who have come together to say like this is not the model we want to work with, like this is the model that we want to work with and that we feel like is much more sustainable for us to be able to create media. So I feel like I don't know, just in general, if you are feeling really hopeless, I think just remembering that you're not, it's so cheesy, but it's so true. It's like you're not alone in this.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important to remember that like you as an individual are not meant to carry this kind of like fatigue by yourself all of the time. Like it's important to have other people that you can talk to and you can lean on and that you can like draw from so that they can carry you for a little bit and then vice versa. So I think this idea of like, again, like the labor movement is one example of that, but just in other facets of life, I'm like mutual aid. So in other facets of life, like trying to find ways to be a part of a community and be involved and help one another. And like if the game community is your community, like figuring out ways that you can support through energy, finances, whatever, I think that's really important. And knowing that you're not in alone, which is a very video game thing to say, but yeah.
Love it. We all team up to fight God at the end. Spoilers.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
hell yeah.
goddess
Okay.
of capitalism.
Anybody else want to throw out anything they've got on their chest on this particular topic? Doesn't look like it. So we put everything on the table. Hope you guys enjoyed that look at a personal look at layoffs and terrible things that are happening in the industry. But let's get back to what we are like, things that give us hope, things that make us happy. We're going to talk about games we have been playing. Jenny, your first game here is not particularly happy, but go ahead and tell us about it.
I have been slowly working through Slay the Princess, which actually, I think is much more of a beautiful, hopeful game than you may initially think.
Mhm. It's a love
I
story.
It's a love story. For folks who maybe haven't heard us explain it before, I'll do it briefly because I think we've talked about it before. But it is essentially a choice based narrative game where all you know at this beginning are you are on a path in the woods, and the narrator tells you that you are sent to slay the princess. Um, that's the only context you're given. And the game is you figuring out and choosing your actions and seeing what happens as a result of them. This game has such a wide variety of choice. The art style is all sort of hand drawn pencil. They layer it in a way that feels sort of disorienting and unnerving, but still quite beautiful. And it's just a game that I played at first because I was like, yeah, this is like a really cool, just sort of story and gimmick. And I think it's going to be really fun. Honestly, it's been incredibly touching. I don't want to dive too far into the themes because I think part of that joy is the discovery. But if you love looped games that sort of reward the player for digging in and really trying to find every facet of a loop and dig into the differences of what's happening and why, just really rewarding game to play. And the soundtrack, side note, the soundtrack, every run you do, because it's got sort of a run based structure with the loops, you get a customized soundtrack of the songs that play on your run, which is really cool. And so I've like downloaded that, and I've been enjoying that as I work now too.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I need to check that out.
it's really good.
um, I want to shout out something that Jenny's gonna probably have to do a little spiel for. So go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, okay. Probably I am involved in this game is why I'm doing this spiel.
Yeah,
Is that
disclaimer.
okay? Yes, disclaimer. I am involved in Ultros, so I will not be speaking to it. Just to let that breathe.
Yeah,
And
and
yeah.
obviously I know Jenny. She is
What?
behind this game, so that's the disclaimer. Uh, if you want to take what I say with a grain of salt, you can. But Ultros is amazing, y'all. You should be playing it. You can see some of my like I did a preview and that's up. I wish Mike was here because he has also been playing through it. Essentially, it's like a kaleidoscope in a game. It's art. It's beautiful. It's a Metroidvania. It's got elements. I think we have talked a little bit about this before, but it's got elements of different things coming in. So you've got like the stylish action game in there as well, where you kill baddies as you're going along, and they're all weird. They're all just weird. Like this is going to be a very bizarre game, but it is so good. You kill baddies along the way, and depending on how stylish you are as you kill them, you get uh things to eat, bits and bobs of the creature themselves, like tentacles and guts and things. Um, and they will give you more nutrients the better you do. And your nutrients are actually your sort of like point, like skill points that you can put into different um, abilities and that sort of thing. And then every once in a while, you run into like a mycated brain or something. I remember it being fungal. It's all everything's fungal. Ugh. And that lets you like lock an ability so you don't lose it because it is a roguelike as well. So you are constantly going through loops. And it's just like you're living through constantly like the birth, rebirth, and death of the universe, and you're growing things in the womb of the cosmos. And it's so yeah, Jenny's over there
I'm
laughing
laughing. It's
because
so
it's
funny.
that's the game, because that's the game, Jenny. It's great, it's beautiful, it is action packed, it is thoughtful in the way that it does things. Like y'all should be checking this out if you are not checking this out. Ultros is it's doing really well critically.
Yeah.
Like I'm so excited that I like every once in a while things just don't do as well as I want them to do, but Ultros is doing very well, so I'm glad to hear that. Um I don't know what else I should say. Like I don't want to like talk too long about it or like that's it. That's the taste of it. So go check it out. Ultros is Metroidvania roguelike narrative fun, interesting, beautiful game. So you should be checking that out. Janet, you're
Yeah.
playing your first game here I really want to get to, and I keep saying
Oh,
that, and
me
I just
too.
keep not finding the time. Tell me
Oh,
about it.
yeah. I'll go start with the. So I just do the one. I just do the first one, or should I? Where do
Do
I
the
go?
first one. Do the
Okay, I'll
first
do the first one. So Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain. This is a free to play game on itch.io from the Celeste team. In honor of the, I believe, sixth year anniversary of Celeste, they put this out. Apparently, I think they made it really quickly too, which is wild to think about because it's a
Mhm.
game that works, and I just think that's the impressive in itself. But this is a 3D platformer like take on Celeste, so it's very much leaning on like Super Mario 64, but also has like quite a bit of other Mario games in there too. Like there's a also Madeline looks really cute in this game. Like it
Mhm.
has it isn't just leaning on like Mario 64. It has like that art style of that, you know,
Mhm.
again, Celeste 64. So it's like, what if we made Celeste as a 3D platformer on the N64 is the idea. Everything's very cute. Like Madeline, the main character, has like a big old baby head. Still has the same kind of mechanics with like, if you've played Celeste, you know, it's a challenging platformer. It has like multiple dashes that you can string together, and it's telegraphed through the change in the color of the hair. It's all of that. It's a snowy landscape that kind of gives that mountainy feel. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I will say it's not like it's, you know, oh my god, this is the pinnacle of like 3D platformers, which also 3D platforming is really tough to make and get right for like a number of reasons. I think there's a
Mhm.
reason this is not a popular genre anymore. And I love 3D platformers, but I think they are tough to do well. That being said, I do think this is worth checking out in your time if you're a fan of Celeste because it's experiencing in a new context. I think it is quite fun and fairly challenging. And by that, I mean it's challenging yet fair. In its approach, it is a lot of perspective challenge. So you're going to want to swoop the camera around to get a good sense of things. I believe time to 100% it is like a little bit over 2 hours, depending on skill. I only put in like 30 minutes or so far. But yeah, really cute. And my favorite thing about this game, well, two things. One, they have a very cheeky like signposting in there of like, oh, you're not supposed to be reading this, but while you're here, let me tell you how to do like a wall jump or something like that.
Mhm.
And they have optional areas, again, kind of a nod to like getting, you know, the strawberries or whatever in Celeste and like being zooped somewhere else or the cassette tapes. They have like areas that mimic or like are in the style of the challenge areas in Super Mario Sunshine when you don't have the flood pack anymore. They're not as hard as that, I don't think, because those were like really hard. But they're in that energy and they have a soundtrack that's actually like very reminiscent of the music from those areas. So definitely like just a fun little nod and homage to Celeste and like older platform. If you're a platformer stan, I think it's definitely something that you want to check out just because it's so cute cool to not just experience or reference, but have that feel like very baked into the gameplay itself. And I think Celeste
Mm.
64 provides that. Really wish I could play it like just like on my Steam Deck or something, but I don't know how to put itch.io on there. Maybe I'll make
Yeah.
Isaiah, but we'll
We know
see.
it's possible, but
Yeah, like someone can do
uh
it. They can do it. We'll figure it
I
out.
know it's like the first comment on the itch page is like runs great on Steam Deck. I'm like, don't
That's
Yes,
know
great.
how.
they're figuring it out. If you know, but also if you know, don't tell me because like I'm not gonna tell Isaiah at Isaiah by Day. He's the one that's gonna actually do it. Like I know there's solutions. I am not interested in learning them. I would like it done for me, and that is
Yeah,
why I'm a console gamer at heart. Buy a
lovely.
box, you plug it in, it's over.
Speaking of secrets, one of your games,
Mm.
most of the people who are watching this won't see the doc. One of the games on here you have bolded.
Yeah.
So what's this bolded game in here, Janet?
This is Little Guardsman. I bolded it because we don't always go like fully in depth on what we've been playing, and this is one that I'd if I had to spend time on just one, I'd pick this one. Little Guardsman. This is probably one of the first times that, like, for me, if I'm not playing a game right when it comes out or before it comes out, it's just tough to get to because more stuff just
Uh-huh.
keeps coming out.
Mhm.
And I'd been sitting on this code for quite some time. This game, again, it's called Little Guardsman. It came out January 23rd. So it's been out for almost a month. But I finally found some time during one of my streams where I'm like, hey, we can fit in another game here. Let's finally, you know, Little Guardsman finally came off the bench. And I'm not going to lie, it was run on that field. And I'm like, I don't know if you're going to like how it's going to be. It looks cool. The pitch is you're like a 12-year-old kid and you're running the castle gate. Like you're at the guard shed and you're choosing like who comes in and who doesn't. So it's very like at that pitch, I'm like, okay, cool, papers, please, but cute cartoon,
Yep.
but point and click, like that's the vibes that you get off the kind of initial pitch. The delivery of this, and again, only like maybe like an hour or so into this, it is so good. It's so fun. It's so funny. It's surprising and quirky and entertaining. And also, I think it does enough to break out of just being like, oh, it's just like Papers, Please. Like when you're kind of I think doing these nods to existing popular games, like it's really important to kind of bring something else to the tables, right? With Goobies, it's the fact that they're gooey. It's other things too, but ultimately it's the fact that they're gooey. Let's be honest, and that was enough. I had a great time with Goobies. This one's shtick that gets revealed fairly early is you end up getting like a time travel aspect or like a time rewind. So that was a fascinating introduction to the gameplay flow of like who goes in and like did you pick the right person kind of thing, because I'm like, well, how are you, doesn't that defeat the purpose of me having a pick? Like I can just do it over and pick the right thing. But the sort of secret sauce that they seem to have drizzled onto this game is that you still might not get, like we're all going to get different things out of the conversation. So like one of your goals besides just like deciding who comes in and out is to maybe like learn more or get more out of the person, because that information could like come in to play later or affect the world. So like an example is there was someone where like I confiscated like money from them, and then I can then use that money later to like spend it or not spend it because it's like kind of dirty money or whatever. Or like, oh, I stopped someone from having this weapon. The game says they'll probably be back later, so like maybe this stops them from, and again, I don't know how under the hood how much will this all pay off. It's a little too early to tell, but it's stuff like that where there's such an intriguing aspect to the gameplay with having this like rewind device, because you also are still limited by other things. Like you can, you have like a set of tools, but you have to like charge the tools. So there's like a lot of without being overwhelming, there's a lot of additional complexity to what you're doing. And again, before I kind of, end it there with the Guardsman, I really got to shout out how funny and surprising the writing is. It's very like pushing PG-13,
Mhm.
chaotic, kind of like adult-esque cartoon energy that it brings forth. Stuff like, I don't even know if I want to give anything away because it was so surprising, but like they'll really go for it with here's a simple one that's like not as interesting as the one I first thought of. So this one's like a lighter spoiler, but they had like a person that was like, oh, I'm here to like see my kids, and like I have this like crummy ex-husband, he's trash, blah blah blah. You put the lie detector on them and they really start to like just unravel in a really chaotic way. Or like you put the truth serum on them and they just start like spilling their guts and they just like swear up a storm. Every other word is bleeped out and it's so aggressive and so like unexpected at the time. And obviously now that I know the tone, like that novelty sort of wears off in a sense, but like I just feel like they wrote such like funny and zany little things. Like I just was totally floored by how good this ended up being, because like the pitch seemed cool, but I'm like, oh, I don't know if it's going to deliver. And it not only did it deliver, I feel like it exceeded my expectations. And everyone that watched me stream it were suddenly like, oh my god, either didn't know this game or didn't get to it yet. I got to put this on the top of my list. Like everyone was feeling it. Like if we had the in-game UI, everyone like that would have popped up in the screen. This is what I definitely got to get back to. It was so cool. So yeah, Little Guardsman, check it out.
Absolutely. One also that I haven't gotten to yet. Jenny, what's your second game on this list?
My second game is Thirsty Suitors, which is
Yeah.
great because, the DICE Awards coming up. So it's, one of the nominees there. I just finished it and my God, we just had such good games last year. Thirsty Suitors, on paper, I feel like you would see it and you'd be like, this is a lot. Like this game is maximalist. Just it throws everything in the kitchen sink into itself. This is a narrative game. This has turn-based battles, kind of a la Persona style, with some of the buffs and debuffs that you get in terms of emotional debuffs. This game has skating. This game has cooking, like quick time cooking mini game mechanics. This game has like everything. And while I don't think it does everything perfectly, the way all of these seemingly disparate elements just meld together to create this amazing package of just joyful sort of chaos is wonderful, and I had a great time playing it. The story is really, it's a returning home story. You play this character named Jala who isn't the best person, to put it mildly. She's left a string of just sort of bad relationships in her wake. And so, in returning to her hometown, she's got to really face a lot of what she's done in the past and try and make amends. And so, this is almost kind of fitting for Valentine's Day. This is almost like an undating simulator where you're going back and like doing a little bit of an apology and sort of an acceptance tour with each of your suitors. And ultimately, this is a game kind of like Venba that also gets into some generational, just sort of cultural divides and the ways that like younger generations, especially of immigrant families, may have hard times connecting with their elders. There's just a great there's just great arcs for all of the characters, and I really enjoyed it. And the soundtrack's awesome. I will say my favorite part was definitely the cooking. You basically do these quick time actions to do each ingredient step, and there's actually a wheel that you can spin to either compliment or to compliment your parent, but the wheel sometimes is unsuccessful. So like if you try to compliment your mom and be like, "Oh, your sari is so beautiful," sometimes she'll say, "Oh, thank you, your dad got this for me." So like, "Ah, this is great." And you'll get like a boost in your cooking score. But sometimes if the compliment wheel does not spin your way, you'll compliment your mom and she'll be like, "Pay attention to the cooking, like you're this is why you're not doing a
Oh
good
my god,
job."
that's so good
It's
I
amazing.
love
because
it.
it's
And
so
so there's this
true.
it is. And so there's this risk reward if you want to like take time from cooking to like try and like butter up your parents, you know? It's just there's so much humor and joy in this game, even though it deals with like some really tough topics about just like loving yourself and how you love yourself and how that kind of comes across in the relationships you hold with people. Um, I loved it. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, this is another one I need to check out. So I'm excited, and having finished it, I'm like a little even more intrigued because the people I have spoken to mostly haven't finished it. I'm like, is it gonna
Mhm.
land? So it seems like you're pretty high on it still.
I think so. I think there is one there's one sort of side story that happens where I'm like there's like a skate park and they're like the Tony Hawk skating stuff is not Tony Hawk. Don't go into it expecting that. So like the skating element for me was the weakest
Mhm.
part. I did not really enjoy it. I felt like it was a bit more simplistic than I personally wanted from a mechanic like that. Um and the story related to the skating mechanic was not as compelling for me and it felt a little bit like kind of out of place amidst all the other stuff happening. But I think that's sort of a minor, like, I was willing to let that go just because everything else was so much fun.
Okay. You heard it here first, Jenny. Really big into skating. Really don't come at her with weak skating.
Grew up on
Um,
Tony Hawk.
yeah. I want to shout out. This is one of those situations where someone got to me during Steam Next Fest, and I just like it almost fell through the cracks. And I'm so glad that they reached back out because things were wild last week. But Caves of Lore is a solo developer, Mike Robbins. They actually released on Steam January of last year, but just dropped the game on like mobile devices. And this is like a really crunchy D&D type game. And I got into this yesterday and I was just like I am so my mind is blown when games that are this kind of complicated work well on mobile, and you have to put so much work into making it work well on mobile. And I was just like, "Oh, man, I'm stuck playing this game now. Like, this is a game for me. I'm having so much fun with it." Um, I've got a code now for the Steam page, so I wanna go in and, like, play it on PC as well. But it's really classic. It is a pixel art. It's like you don't really have much of a narrative. You are jumping in and you fall down a hole and there you go.
Hell
You're
yeah.
off on an adventure. But yeah, I like this is the sort of thing that I love. Caves of Lore. when a game comes at you that is so up your alley that you didn't really have on your radar at all, and because someone reached out, because they'd heard about your work or whatever, like they're just like, "Hey, can you check this out? This is a solo person. They've been working on it for 6 years." And to play it and to find that you're actually really into it is, I love it. Go check it out. Caves of Lore on like iOS and uh, Android. I'm like, what is the other mobile thing? And also on Steam.
Wait, so
Besides that, oh,
just to
go ahead.
clarify, you said you played it on mobile.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
and it's
cool.
Was it like a
like
phone or like in like touchscreen or like with the controller?
I'm like so no, I touchscreen. It is just
That's
really
wild
well done.
because
That's
it
Yeah,
like I'm
awesome.
looking at it on Steam and like, obviously,
right.
I believe you because you're like, "Oh, it worked really well." So I'm like, "Oh, so it works for me." Like, I'm like, "Sure." But I'm having, like, a hard like, some of the movement, I'm like, "Oh, wow." Like, that seems really tough to, like, pull off in a more again, I don't wanna say, like, casual in a pejorative sense, but, it's like it's a limited, control scheme is, like, kinda what mobile
Yes,
is known for, so that's wild. Before you move on too, I do wanna, I pulled it up the Steam page, and I
go
wanna
for it.
read the description because this is like the first, and I'm sure this is like the only developer that did this, but this is the first time I've seen a description that's like written straight up like from the developer, like in a
In
very
the first
casual way,
person.
and I think it's
Yeah,
so sweet. It says, I created Caves of Lore because of my deep love for RPGs. This project took me 6 years to make, and I learned a lot about coding, art, and storytelling. If you reach the end, then be sure to let me know. Caves has deep combat, classic styled pixel art, and of course, lore, and then a book emoji. And like, I love the
This is so
itch.io energy
sweet.
within the
yeah.
Steam thing. And I also like that they pointed out something that I think a lot of people fail to think about sometimes, which is like, learning through doing. And like, I love that this developer is highlighting
Mm.
that they took this on. Obviously, they wanted to make it and they had a passion for it, but part of what it seems like they were looking to get out of it was that learning experience. And like, to learn through creation, I think is really like beautiful and like cool. And like, I don't know, like I feel like I don't know this person at all, but I feel very like proud of like them having accomplished that or whatever.
We're proud of you, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I know this sentence right here. It said, I dedicated myself to work 5 minutes a day, no matter what, and built the game piece by piece, not really knowing where I was going or how it would all end.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's so cute.
this
Also,
is
it looks
so
like
So
I'm like
essentially, if
sweet.
you're not playing
so
Caves of Lore,
emotional,
you
but
have no heart.
Um, yeah, no,
Like, I'm
honestly,
downloading
was
it
it
right now on my
$10? Fuck it,
phone.
why not?
Go get
Whatever.
that.
I
Uh,
don't need the money. It's fine. Also, it looks like I'm emotionally distraught over this. It is actually just because my skin's really oily. It's so greasy that it's poured into my eyes. But that's the thing. But
No, Janet, don't. You're so emotionally invested in Caves of Lore. I do
It's
also want to
okay.
shout
I
out.
get into indies too.
Yeah, it's okay, Janet. I can send Rufus over to snuggle you. Um, I want to shout out News Tower, which is out in early access. Which, like, if you're a journalist in any sense, like, this might hit a little too close to home. It's a little too authentic. Like, I got a little panicky playing it because it's like
ooh,
your deadlines.
interested?
You can't. You have to be doing a million things. You have to be wearing all these hats. You have to be caring not only about like what stories you're doing, but also like are you like reaching the right audience and like
Ooh,
making sure that
Mm.
it's kind of like The Sims too. So you have to make sure your workers are like they have bathrooms so that they can actually work and not be distracted and like a lot of fun. It's like a builder. It's like a like Fallout Shelter situation. It's not
oh,
like it's like Fallout Shelter, not a Fallout Shelter.
sure.
Um, and you're constantly building, you have to worry about money, so you have to, like, do some things, like maybe working for the mob that you're not feeling great about, but you have to continue on, you have to take out loans, so you have to, like, do different it's a really cool the only thing I'll say about, uh, maybe some downsides for me was, like, it's a bit chaotic, and obviously it's in early access, so hopefully they grow a little bit, but, like, the tutorial was everything happening all at once, and I'm like, "There's a lot, it's very deep." So I hope they streamline that a little bit, but really cool, interesting, like, it's one of those games you'll jump into and then look up and it's 5 hours later sort of thing. Uh, and then really quickly for me and Jenny, I wanna, shout out the demos that we have on here from Steam Next Fest that we didn't get a shout out. Children of the Sun from me. Crypt Custodian, obviously we talked about up there. Dungeonborn, we talked a little bit about. Manami Lane, which by the way, every time I go to the Manami Lane channel, it's Jenny on the screen playing it. So I get to see her face. So if you want to see Jenny's face, go to Manami Lane. Until then, we talked about Kingsgrave was a game I didn't have on my radar. It was one of those 10% games that I was like, I guess I get to check this out. It turned out to be really cool. Haunty is a game I've been looking forward to, and it's very great. Duck Detective, me and Jenny both have this on our list. Magical Delicacy, everyone should be checking this out, and I feel like not enough people are. And then Chasing the Unseen, which is coming out in like March. Jenny, what's your list?
Awesome. Let's see. I have Botany Manor, Indica, which we talked about until then. Please touch the artwork too. It's weird. It's like a weird adventure game set in a painting. I loved it. Coffee Caravan, Haunty, Duck Detective, Lightyear Frontier, Crypt Custodian, Manami Lane as well, Tales of Kinzera, Cabernet, and Crow County. Special shout out, Crow County was really cool. If you want like old school Resident Evil, like if you like Signalis, like it's that kind of vibe, check that out. It's really fun.
Janet, anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah. What did I write down here? Yeah, Boxes Lost Fragments. Again, kind of only like 30-ish minutes in. Enjoying it so far. It was the one that I talked about a few episodes ago for like our big calendar thing. It's kind of like has the room energy where you're solving little puzzle boxes. I think it's really cool. It's satisfying to, mess with really ornate funky structures. The sound design's good. I feel like could be a little bit more. I forgot what my issue was with it, but it is pronounced, and that's like solid enough in a game like this for me. And then also like I've been playing a lot of Lethal Company, which is not a me game at all, but I've been streaming it with Remap, and I kind of want to like continue playing it even outside of that, just because I'm enjoying the secret progression of like just learning more about the world and how you can like use that to then further your goals. But again, Lethal Company, y'all probably know what Lethal Company is. Like you go around, spooky stuff happens, but it's not like completely horrific. It's a lot of like, oh, you're trying to again talk about capitalism, right? It's like, oh, you got the company, and it is funny that I know for the we're seeing a lot of. I love a game that can poke fun at something like that. So yeah, you go around, you explore, you're trying to get loot to give to the company and hit quota. It's the infinite growth model, so eventually you will die, but yeah, and then along the way it's like, oh, there's like, what was that? You can scan it and add it to your like information. So yeah, it's a fun time. But those are ones that I'm spending time with, and I gotta beat some or all of these because my playing list is quickly ballooning to too many games at once, and I need to.
And it's only February.
Yeah, I need to cull it down. So it's like, okay, if you're gonna stay, like let's hang out, and if not, maybe we don't hang out again. I don't know.
We really need to do.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah. We need to do an Indie Council Lethal Company game at some point.
That would be amazing.
That would be so fun.
But until then, that's the end of this week's council. Thank you everyone for joining us. People can follow us on or listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google until April. The Indie Council has its own socials, and I believe Janet runs those mostly, and she put up a tunic Valentine's today, which was definitely my jam. I appreciated it so much. But this session is closed. Go play some indies.